All
Welcome,
right,
welcome.
welcome everyone to our presentation today, our webinar. We're going to be talking about transforming IT talent acquisition for 2023. I'm Chris Beckage, and Natalie Wensler is joining me. We're going to get into a quick introductions of ourselves real fast. I've been in the industry, the staffing talent industry, for over 25 years. Sit on several board situations or board seats across the U.S. and helping areas grow their IT infrastructure, IT staffing associations. I speak frequently on podcasts and webinars, and last year the company I work for, Procom, we're focused more on the IT staffing arena. We filled over 1,700 jobs in the US and have a lot of experience interacting with companies of all sizes.
Awesome. Good morning, all. My name is Natalie Winsler. I'm the Senior Manager of Career Pathways at TechPoint. I'm focused on helping to articulate what occupations are available in tech and helping to inclusively grow the tech workforce in Indiana. I'm really excited to join you all today. I have a lot of expertise within skills-based talent management, and we'll be covering a lot of that today as we talk about how do we really transform our acquisition of talent in technology. So what we'll see, we're going to do a little level setting within Zoom. We will be interacting with you all and hope that you'll engage both in the poll questions that we'll have throughout the chat box, and you can submit any questions that you have in the question and answer section. So just level setting with Zoom, if you go to the bottom of your window, depending on the size of your window, you'll have different icons. If you don't see the chat box or the question answer, you can click the three dots that say more. That will show additional ways for you to be able to interact with that information. So with that, we're going to go over what are we covering today. So our agenda, we're going to start off with skills-based and candidate-centric job postings. Then we'll transition into, well, what is the meaningful work and compelling reasons for your company, and to highlight that within the hiring process. Then we'll talk about what does that interview process timeline look like, and the importance of DEI and B within your hiring process, and how that's baked in from the beginning to the end and future. And then we'll finalize our time today with the trends and takeaways with everything that we've shared, and hope that we will have some time for question and answer at the end as well. So with that, Chris.
So we wanted to level set. One of the things we want people to think about is the last 20 years, where we progressed from. So if looking at this video or this screenshot, 20 years ago, we saw our videos. We went to stores like Blockbuster Video to stand in line, get DVDs, etc. Now on the right side, we use streaming services. Our phones were simply phones. Imagine that. They didn't have really much texting, video, other things. Now our phones are computers. Our TVs back then weighed 250 plus pounds. Now they're visions of art on your screen that weigh 20 pounds. And we shopped at the mall at stores like Radio Shack, and now we go to Amazon, and 4 hours later, it's sitting at our door. The reason why we wanted to start with this slide today is many HR and talent acquisition departments are still functioning as if it's a 2003 or 2013. They're using methods from 20 years ago to attract candidates, and the market has changed significantly. And we're going to talk about that today. I'm going to pass it off to Natalie to talk about skills-based and candidate-centered job postings.
Awesome. So we've been operating probably in a couple decades ago with how we're hiring individuals. So we want to know, we're going to launch a poll and ask, what is your knowledge of skills-based hiring? The options are, I could teach about skills-based hiring. I can use skills-based hiring in my hiring process. I know what it is, not how to do it, or I've heard of skills-based hiring. Or the last option is, this is my first time hearing about skills-based hiring. So leave it up for about another 15 seconds. This is a quick hit. Would love to get a sense of everyone's knowledge today. A few more moments. Awesome. So then we're sharing our results now. So we've got a mixed crowd here today. The majority of people is, I can use skills-based hiring in my hiring process. And then it's about even throughout all of the other options. So that's really helpful, and appreciate you all sharing within this poll. So as we keep this in mind, we are hoping to get closer to what are the skills we need in our role. So on this slide, you'll see an example of a traditional job posting. And for this role, it's for an IT support specialist. So as you take this information in, there are some hints of skills. There's also some vagueness, particularly when we say use your tech savviness. What do we mean by that? And even another example on this job posting is that we're saying we need 1 to 2 years of experience in a similar role. It's like, well, would you hire someone with less than 1 year experience? Or what is a similar role? So when we're thinking candidate-centric job postings, we want to be as clear as possible. So what you'll see as on the example of our skills-based job posting is we take the exact same information and make it more focused on the skills needed in that role. And then we define those competencies based on how that competency is used in that job. So again, this is the same information we had before, making it more clear and showing those tasks and activities within the competencies. So those required competencies are what we need day one. We need someone to have a certain skill level immediately to be successful in this role. But what's important about a skills-based job posting is that we also show what are the preferred competencies. So this is, it's separated into 2 slides because of the purposes of visualization here today, but you would see this listed in, fully listed on an actual job posting to then show, well, the preferred competencies are, in this example, office management tools, critical thinking, and writing. We have a training method in our own organization, or we partner with someone to build these skill sets with that individual through the onboarding process. So helping to show what we're moving away from and what we're moving toward with the skills-based job posting helps to show the power of taking a skills-based approach. So you'll see on the next slide that we have this the almost like that 2003 to the 2023, that we want to use the competencies that someone is using on the in the job on the job posting. And by doing that, we're able to help someone see what do they need to step in with and what is this company going to build with me. And if we're focused on the competencies needed in the role, we're reducing the biases that may have been impacting our decision making by just saying, well, we need all of these things. This role has done all these things in the past. We need it now. And not doing that check can really put your company at a detriment to keeping the speed of the labor market that we have today. So what are those benefits of taking a skills-based approach? So we have another poll on the next slide. We have a few examples, but would love to hear from you all. What positive impact do you want to see in your hiring process? The options are increase the number of applicants, attract better qualified applicants, increase diversity in applicants and on staff, and reduce turnover or improve time to hire. And you can select multiple, or it says single. So what's your top one? Because I'm sure we all want them all. What's that top positive impact? About another 5 seconds. All right. So what we're really focused today with our group is how can we attract better qualified applicants? And again, all of these benefits, we want to build our talent hiring and management process to work toward. But particularly for attracting better qualified applicants, this is a great opportunity to think through on how can we increase that quality? And if we have on our job posting what we're looking for, individuals will be able to better self-select in to applying rather than that kind of, oh, well, I'll apply to this. I don't really know what it is, but I'll go. But the reality is, in the last data point that we have on this slide, is that women tend to apply only to jobs when they feel 100% that they meet the job requirements. And men will apply if they meet 60%. So already, if we aren't clear on the job posting what we're looking for, and there's other information on there that may or may not be part of the decision-making process, the reality is that we already are disproportionately eliminating women as well as people of color and those with disabilities before we even have the ability to interview them. So there's a lot of case studies and benefits to taking a skills-based approach. These are a few, again, just on the screen, but what we really want to focus on is, well, why do we need to take a skills-based hiring approach? So the 3 components is to remove credential requirements whenever possible. So this is the first check. So if we say yes for licensure, safety, any policy that says, yes, we have to have a certain educational attainment level, then keep it. and use the competencies that you need for that role. So it's always a both and. And if that first check is, can we remove this credential requirement, is a yes, then take that off, remove it, and then still use the competencies that you know you need someone to be successful in the role, so that we can remove those barriers to people to both apply and then use that information through our hiring process to be more effective and equitable. So how do we do it? How do we actually create a skills-based job posting? So there are 6 steps. And that first one we've been talking about fairly heavily so far, and it's, what are the competencies? You can either use a current job posting that you have, use a few free tech tools to elevate, well, this is what's currently on your job posting, or have conversations with your hiring managers. What are those skills that someone needs to perform successfully in that role? And then you can rank order those competencies, really have some meaningful conversations with your hiring teams to say, these are the most important. Maybe there's a few that we can eliminate so we can stay focused in this job posting and advertisement. Then we have some terminology to make sure we have a balance between occupational and foundational competencies. Have an awareness, are we able to train to this competency? Because all competencies can be trained to. It's a matter of, do we as an employer have the time and resources to do this? Or do we work with an education training program to be able to work on those competencies? And then that 5th step is, how do we have the required competencies and preferred in that organized way, and then write the inclusive competency definitions. So again, we're seeking as much clarity, and with this upfront investment, you're going to be able to see the reward and the efficiency with the interview cycle, with onboarding as well. So that's the focus on how do we really start our skills-based job posting and candidate-centric focus. So now we're going to talk about meaningful work and the compelling reasons for your company.
Thank you, Natalie. That was a great summary of how to change your approach to job postings and job descriptions. We're going to get into how to get candidates interested now, but we're going to start with a poll here. What is the top thing you feel IT professional job seekers are seeking? You can click one here: benefits, company stability, DE&I, maximum compensation, schedule flexibility, training and development. We'll give 10 to 15 seconds for responses here. All right, let's close out the poll. And our response is, what the audience here is saying, company stability and maximum compensation with schedule flexibility. So that sets the benchmark for where we're going to talk. And those are some of the key things we're going to be speaking about. Going into our presentation, Procom and our VMS partners, which we surveyed 10,000 IT professional workers in the last 3 months, had some interesting results that we want to share with you. So these are people working contract and direct placement jobs across North America in the IT and professional. The professional is accounting, finance, supply chain, procurement, marketing, etc. What came back was interesting was compensation is considered table stakes. It is important, but it was ranked 8th in the order that we gave people the option to select. Many of you guys put that as number 1. What the feedback from the audience is, if you're not competitive, you're not even in the game. So the next things they looked at was meaningful work, schedule flexibility, which we talked about, company stability were the other things we mentioned in the survey. We're going to go through some of these things in the next couple minutes, but it's important to realize compensation is key, but after that, these are the things you want to focus on. So meaningful work, what is it? Well, Generation Z is demanding it. So when you're interviewing and preparing to interview people, what we're saying to you is you have to be prepared to answer questions on long-term training, how you're going to nurture the first personal and professional side. The personal is something that's rather new to many folks. They're not used to having to do that. And then show people how they're valued. It's not just how you recognize. They want to know what they're doing matters internally, to the clients, and to the community. So you have to be able to define your purpose, which is going to lead to our next slide here, which is interesting for me, because when I started my career in the mid to late 90s, this wasn't a question being asked now. In the hundreds of interviews I've done in the last few years, this is commonly asked for me when people want to join my company or even our clients, is what is your purpose? And what they mean by that is, why does your company exist? There's a business reason that exists. You have to be able to articulate that. What is the value to the employees and customers? And then more and more, especially with Gen Z coming in, is how are you giving back to the community and in the environment? How are you making the world more sustainable? So we highly recommend that you have your team prepared on how to respond to these questions and be consistent and have it as part of your corporate website, your values, your mission statement, etc. So compelling reasons is an interesting thing. So the reality is when you're recruiting talent, the people you're calling have the skill sets. The toughest thing we get now is how to get people to answer the phone or respond via email, text, whatever format you're talking about. And there's a handful of compelling reasons we've learned from our job seekers that they want to hear about. Number one is disruption. When you look at these name brands, they all disrupted the way we live our lives. Amazon and how we shop, Uber and how we commute, Netflix and how we watch shows and media. SpaceX is rather new, but in the future, our vacations can be to outer space. And LinkedIn is how we communicate. It's the professional communication tool. So not every company is going to be able to have disruption to this level, but if you are disrupting something in your industry, make sure you highlight that. Tell what you're doing and what the outcome is going to be for the company, the businesses that you're working with, and the community. It's what makes you different. Keep in mind, and especially in the IT professional arena, there is an ego that people have. They want to sit with their friends and say, look what I'm doing, look who I'm working for. It's different or better than what you're doing. Fair or unfair, that is something that comes up. Up next is voice. Job seekers that reach out to firms like mine, Procom, which we're in the staffing industry, often are frustrated with their voice not being heard in the company they work for. So you have to express to them in the interview process and even in the job posting how you allow this to happen. Please don't say it's a suggestion box in the lunchroom or a email distribution list. That does not work. They want to know on some sort of cadence, monthly, quarterly, that they can sit down with leadership and be asked their opinion and share their opinions. So talk about how this happens, but make sure you're actively listening when they do this. Don't just make it a task item, a check item box list that you had the meeting, but listen to it, write it down, and have action items from there. On the feedback for performance, the annual reviews are not what people want anymore. They want more consistent reviews, so they want to hear from their employers how they're doing. They want to tell the employer what they think they should be doing too. So the recommendation is quarterly, what we call connection meetings, where you sit down and the 3 questions we often share there is what should we start doing, stop doing, and continue doing. So if you can get in a format of doing that, we've all had reviews in the past where someone says to you, remember 8 months ago you didn't do something? And you're sitting there saying, why are you telling me now? So that's not how we want to operate. And then transparency is a key thing people want to. They want to know their career path. They want to know how the company's doing. And that segues to our next slide, which is the workplace schedule flexibility. So work-life balance is now being referred to as work-life integration. The pandemic has showed us in the last few years that we have to manage both to keep people their mental health in a good situation, but we all have personal things going on in our life that are important to us. Hybrid is the norm moving forward. I know many companies are trying to come back full time, but the reality is the job seekers are telling us they don't mind coming in the office as long as there's collaboration days. And I love that terminology because it means it's a structured day where you're not where you're meeting with your teammates, your clients, your peers on actionable items that can be done, and it creates that collaboration communication that we all miss that's hard to do virtually. Please don't have people come in the office to sit on Zoom meetings. That is the biggest turnoff that is shared with us in this survey. And also take note here, 60% said they'll accept lower pay for schedule workplace flexibility. That does not mean they're going to take 20, 30% less. It means they're willing to take a few, maybe up to 5% less in base or compensation to have the flexibility to manage their schedule, not commute in, et cetera. Time is our most valuable asset. So company stability and growth is the big thing that was mentioned in the survey results too. The last 6 months, we've seen plenty of news about downsizing, layoffs, turnover, lots of different news items. The job seekers are now very much asking this question and demanding answers. So is your company comfortable discussing their financials, their growth mode, what's happening in the news? If you did layoffs, why? Think about it from yourself. If someone called you right now and you're employed and happy, why would you switch jobs to a company that you have some uncertainty on? Going back to transparency, whether you're publicly or privately held, I want to know what is your financial stability, what is your growth strategy, and if you are acquiring or downsizing, tell me why and how it's going to impact me. The other things you want to talk about here is, or one thing you want to be careful of is longevity in business is a great accomplishment, but it's not the reason why people are going into jobs nowadays. So being in business for 40, 50 years is awesome. but people today are willing to go to newer companies with less tenure based on the compelling reason and the opportunity. So you have to be focused more on the compelling reasons than the longevity of business. If you acquired a company or expanded business, talk about what the impact and why you did it. That gets people excited that you acquired so-and-so some company, and this is the impact it's going to have on your company and the community and your clients. And if there's any cool things going on, especially in the IT front, they want to know about the latest and greatest technology you're using, different marketing strategies to build your brand, what makes you stand out. These are things people are asking in the interview that we highly recommend that you and your team are prepared to discuss. So candidate-centered job postings, this is taking what Natalie said to the next level. And this is a real life example of a client we worked with in the US that was struggling to hire software developers. And one of the things they were missing was selling one of their core themes. This was a company in the energy business that was working with energy providers to make the planet greener. So controlling emissions and other things like that to make the world greener, safer, carbon neutrality. So this is how we spun their job posting into something that led to them filling their jobs and having high success rate with attraction and retention. So the opportunity gets right to it's a sales pitch. Have you always wanted to work for a cutting edge software company in an innovative industry? Are you looking for a remote position with flexibility? Do you want to work for do you want a greener planet? Adding that keyword in was interesting. The client didn't think it was important. When we added it in, there was a tremendous influx of candidates that was one of their purposes, their visions, their missions they wanted to work for that were in software development. On the next screen, we again, we're having a positive 5-year. What makes this job awesome? Why would you want to leave a job to come here? Again, onboarding, killer value prop, greener planet, remote work, strong comp plan. And then what's important for a lot of software developers is having a voice with the product development team on how the product is delivered and sold. So they highlighted those key things. Up next was just a more visual of what we just talked about. Why work here? Again, the carbon neutrality, the greener planet focus is a big thing. There's a lot of people that are focused on that. The work-life integration, we encourage you to do life activities, whether it's yoga at lunchtime, your son or daughter's baseball, soccer game at 4 o'clock, they want you to do that. They talk about how you have a voice and how they meet quarterly to do surveys. The company growth is based on they doubled and their revenue's up, and then the career development plans that people are looking for is 12 to 24 more plans, promote from within, and they focus on skills development, which is what we started the meeting with today. And this is the final job description. To Natalie's point earlier, instead of saying 10 years this and 5 years this and excellent communication skills, it's the required skills. You have to have core coding languages, in this case, Java version 11. You have to have attention to detail. You have to know software program analysis and testing. And then we go to the preferred skills here. And the net result here was the client was able to get a significant influx of candidates. They were able to have a good selection of who to hire, and they filled their, I think it was 8 jobs in like 32 days it took them to fill. So a significant turnaround time. The good news for me was they filled the job. The bad news was we taught them how to do it and they didn't need to use us anymore, which is ultimately a good thing. One other thing we highlight here, given that most people are working remote or hybrid or some format, we highly encourage you to use social media to broadcast your positions and show your culture. The hardest thing to do on a virtual world is show this off. So there's some pictures in this one of how the company did a retreat, some social things, but also in the bottom right is their office and how they do informal meetings. And for software developers know that they don't want to have the structured school lineup, school desk lineup anymore. They want to know I can sit on the floor, we can go outside, very casual, very productive. And then what we also encourage is the world we live in today is snackable items. And what I mean by that is our attention spans are short. So sites like TikTok, Snapchat, YouTube are all about how can you get a message, whether it's text or video, out in 20 to 30 seconds. So if your company does not have a strategy for TikTok or YouTube or other channels like that, we highly encourage you to start building that up. The generations that are coming into the workforce, this is the world they live in, and you're going to be missing out on candidate opportunities and the way to brand your company. So before you post a job, this is our quick summary here. Right to attract all people. This includes avoiding aggressive words that can alienate individuals. Words like aggressive, assertive, he, she, the top 25 colleges. Those are all subjective things that are hard to, who's determining what those are. When you do that, then ask a colleague or friend for feedback. I know I've been guilty, and I'm sure we all have, is where we write something, we spend a day or two on it, we think it's perfect, we have blinders on, we show it to someone else, and they quickly find an error, whether it's spacing or wording or something, and we have to do that. Make sure it speaks to the compelling reasons why someone should work for you. Have videos, testimonials, use social media to broadcast this. Then last but not least, apply to the job. Most people are applying on a mobile device today and not using traditional websites. Can they click and have, when 3 clicks or less, be able to submit their resume and apply for the job? You spend all this time and energy to get them to that step, and you lose those folks at that time. That's heartbreaking. So we want to make sure you can thoroughly go through that process and make it very simple. So interview cycle, this is the next thing that a lot of people talk about with us is how do we, we're losing candidates because it's taking too long. And we're gonna have a poll question here is what is your average time to hire? 0 to 30 days, 31 to 60 days, 60 to 90 days, or over 90 days? We'll give you guys about 10 seconds to respond to this. All right, let's see the results. So we're seeing them, roughly 31 to 60, which is the norm for most organizations. And what we're going to try to show you today is how to speed up that cycle to 14 days, which is very aggressive, but we have companies doing it in North America. So first thing we want to think about is the positive interview experience. And the thing I remind all companies is candidates are interviewing you as much as you're interviewing them. So you keep that as part of your baseline is they have options out there and they want to know the experience that they're going to have. We highly recommend, again, a skills-based job description and hiring process, which means upfront, your organization needs to determine the questions that are going to be asked and how you're going to evaluate the talent. And there needs to be consistency across the board for your organization to do that. That way you can make best decisions. Number two, this is where most organizations fail. They have an opening, but they don't prioritize it. So what we're going to show you in the next slide is how to prioritize that to get that 14-day time to selection, making this a priority for the hiring manager. Natalie spoke earlier about inclusivity and accommodations, making sure you're opening up the posting to attract all candidates, not using words that can push people away. There was a stat earlier that women only apply if they have 100%, women and people of color, if they meet 100% of the skill sets. We don't want to do that. And if we go back to 2003 job descriptions, I had an example, we didn't share it today, but the classic one is here's the minimum qualifications. There's often 10 to 12. Think about that. Minimum qualifications, 10 to 12. Those were normal job postings as of 10, 15, 20 years ago. Prepare yourself, your candidates for the interview, so they know walking in if it's a group interview, a one-on-one interview, the length of the interview. I highly encourage even sharing some of the questions ahead of time to see how they prepare. For your interviewers, prepare them too. And way too often, I've sat in interviews where a hiring manager says something like this: "Hey, Natalie, do you have good communication skills?" Natalie, what's your response to that? 100% yes, I do, right?
Of course.
And then later they come into the job and they have poor communication skills, but you said to them, you said in the interview process, you have good interview or communication skills. Well, you led them with the question. So we got to practice our interviewing with hiring managers to make sure they're not feeding the answers that the candidate will give. The commitment to interview, what we recommend is for senior level positions, 3, maybe 4 interviews. For junior, mid-level, 1 to 2. That might be aggressive, but those are the timeframes people want to get to. Reminder what I said earlier, we live in a snackable items world now where our attention span is short. The active or the passive job seeker might call you today because they had a bad day at work. 2 days later, you respond, they're back to having a good day at work and they're not interested. So you want to take full advantage of that. The other key thing we really want to talk about here is allowing the candidates applying for jobs to speak to potential colleagues. There's 2 reasons why you want to consider this. Number one, it showed that the candidate gets to meet potential peers, sees the culture, and let them ask any questions. That shows transparency, and they're looking for consistency from those folks. Number 2, the employees that speak to this candidate are part of your buy-in process now. You're showing them that you value their time with the organization and you want them to be part of the decision-making process. When you onboard this person, they feel committed to helping onboard this person and making sure they're successful. So it's a twofold exercise there that makes it beneficial for all. And then we're going to talk next about time to selection in 14 days. But the last thing here is always bring in time and interview to allow the candidate to ask questions. And the first one, a lot of it's going to be you asking, and then maybe at the end, when you get to that second, third interview, my recommendation when I start interviews is, if Natalie, if someone was interviewing today, I would say, Natalie, we've talked a few times, you've talked to some of my peers. Let's start with questions you have, because I want to know, how committed are they to the job? How much investment have they done? I know if I was interviewing, I would have probably 25 questions, like what's the top 5? and start to interview that way. And it's very important, especially if they're in leadership roles, to see how prepared they are, how they're going to come with questions, because that's going to show them how they're going to be in meetings down the road. All right, next slide is one of my favorite slides that is probably going to shock a few people on how to do this, but this is possible if you can prioritize. And if you're at 31 to 60 days now and you want to shrink it down, maybe this is getting it down to 30 to extend an offer. But day one is build that candidate-centric skills-based job description. Have a social media strategy, define the skills and what can be trained, prepare the hiring manager, and then begin sourcing and recruitment, whether that's internal or external. By day 5, if you have that all set up properly, have the right business partners for recruiting and sourcing, you should start reviewing candidates or receiving candidates that meet the skills and qualifications or the skills-based needs of the job, and then you set the interview schedule. If for some reason you're not getting a candidate flow, you have to go back to step 1 to say, what was in the job posting, or what are we asking for? Or is there unclarity that is causing confusion in the marketplace? Or if you're in a state with pay transparency and your salary's off, you're gonna have to adjust that. But let's assume you have the candidate flow coming in. On day 1, you're telling hiring managers, day 6, 7, and 8, I need your schedule open to interview. And you're gonna do those interviews and provide evaluations. You're telling potential peers and partners days 9, 10, 11, you have to be available to interview. This is what I said earlier, there's buy-ins to hiring process, onboarding process, et cetera. Day 12 is a final interview with the hiring manager again. This is where I suggested earlier, you ask the candidate what questions they have. You already have the debriefing from the colleagues and from your first interview. You might have some follow-up questions on some of the skills or preferred skills they have. But from there, you should be able to extend an offer day 14. And then we go into, the 2 weeks notice or background checks, whatever comes into play that, you can't always control. But this is a timeline that we have many organizations following today. It's getting, especially when you have the passive job seeker who's dipped their toes in the water, it keeps them engaged, knowing, well, within 2 weeks, I know if I'm getting an offer or not before I retreat back to my job that I may or may not like. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Natalie to close out.
Yeah, and that's super helpful as a visual as we're thinking of, where we started at. What is that skills-based job posting? That's like the day 1. And there's a little even pre-work to that day 1, right? That's when it goes live. But if you put that investment in to understanding the clarity of what you need in those interview questions, then you can ensure that there is a great interview experience, both internally and externally. And then that builds into the onboarding experience. So that step 1 is really ensuring that hiring team understands the full timeline and that the hiring criteria has already been established because you know what's on the job posting, the skills and the interview questions that you're using to assess those skills. So then that step 2 is being able to consistently speak to those compelling reasons that we've already gone over, that work that you can do as a company to ensure that it's clear so that you're able to show how you are supporting that individual during their onboarding experience, but then also over the timeline of them being engaged and what that best works for you and your company, which, we really recommend it's every 6 months or maybe even a little bit more, again, depending on that insight that you already have from being able to know the skill level that individuals are coming in at through this hiring process by using those skills and that effective comparison between the two. So then step 3, what we want to highlight is for these positions, in order to achieve that 14-day hiring cycle, we really want to be mindful of how many interviews are actually happening and for the different level of positions that you have as well. And having this scheduled out prior to and scheduled blocked on your hiring team's schedules are going to help achieve that 14-day interview cycle. And this helps, again, to give that clarity for the job seeker. They know what to expect and how many interviews and where they are in the process. And then you're also able to help the people that are conducting these interviews to be as effective as possible. And then that final step 4 is to have that structured plan, knowing what skills are going to be addressed at the 30, 60, and 90-day mark. And that could include training, mentoring, measuring the success, and then having that purposeful, neutral opportunity for those individuals to provide the feedback so that everybody continuously improve and be empowered to be in that role and in your organization.
And then
So
if I
that
can add one
rounds,
comment,
yes,
add
please.
one comment there. In step 4, that's where we see a lot of organizations have a failure is they get the person onboarded and then they don't define that plan. And then the candidate starts having second thoughts and then maybe goes back to their former firm or stays involved in a recruiting process with others. So clearly defining what success looks like and what training you're going to do is super important to keep the employee engaged. And I would highly recommend you have the hiring manager involved, but an HR or people culture partner too, so they have multiple people to talk to.
Yes, totally. That structured interview or onboarding process is what sets that person up for success for both employee engagement, but then that retention piece. So totally right. So now we're going to do a quick underscoring of the role of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in this hiring process. So these steps should be baked all the way through. So we're not quite at that poll question yet, but thank you though. So with the commitment to DEIB, we are wanting to ensure that we are being very purposeful of what are our diversity goals? How are we ensuring that we're equitable within selecting individuals, that we are being equitable and even offering this opportunity to our current employee base and to those out in the market? And that belonging is really important to ensure that we are meeting our employees where they're at. And this includes many things. So this is really a great start to ensure that these elements are embedded throughout your whole talent hiring and management process. And it cannot be stated enough, but commitment from the C-suite is so important. This helps to set up accountability structures for everyone and to measure it. If we don't measure it, how do we know we're achieving it? And this all pulls together of writing the skills-based job descriptions for all of your jobs, for connecting those competency and interview questions so that we're able to reduce the biases within that whole entire our hiring process that we know have existed in the past. And there's multiple training opportunities to ensure that everyone in your organization is aware of the biases that they have, those unconscious biases that if we have that self-awareness that we can work on reducing how that impacts how we show up at the workplace and also impacting how we make decisions so that we can eliminate the systematic barriers that exist within our companies. If we don't do that work, we don't know what improvements need to be made. And it goes even back to how we were talking about how that neutral feedback opportunity, the transparency is just so important to ensure that everybody feels like they are included within your workplace. This also speaks to ensuring that we're providing and creating spaces for neurodiverse individuals. And that's even throughout the hiring process. Like think about the environment that you are creating during while conducting the interviews. Think about the questions and not saying specific like, did you do this? It's having behavioral and situational interview questions so that everybody can show up and demonstrate the skills that they have. And with this intentionality, we know that this is increasing employee engagement and company performance. And it, again, cannot be stated more, the importance of including diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging components throughout all of your hiring process and your talent management today and into the future. So with that, we have a few trends and takeaways to round out our time together. Chris?
So I'm going to hop in. One of the key things that a lot of employers ask me about is the candidate pool. It's not what they want it to be. It's obviously changing a little bit with the downsizing and layoffs recently, but there's 3 candidate pools that often are forgotten about. Number 1 is your internal department. And what we've seen a lot in the last couple of years is the corporate ladder has been replaced with the corporate lattice, meaning you're moving people amongst departments. Sometimes that can be based on skill sets, but sometimes it's just for innovation. I have several clients who've taken people from legal or human resources into procurement, supply chain, bringing different points of view, leading to innovation for the organizations. There's ways to do this in the organizations through trainings and upskilling and reskilling programs. There's AI tools out there that can help audit your employee base and make suggestions. But keep in mind, employees are expecting growth, career growth plans every 12 to 18 months now. This is your biggest candidate pool. They're your best candidate pool. You spent the time and energy to get them to join your organization. Don't let them leave if there's a fit somewhere else that can make the company and them more successful. Number two, we've all heard of boomerang employees, and this is something I highly encourage, especially in the IT arena. People leave jobs for many reasons. Often it's because of development. They don't feel the company can develop their skills further, so they go to another company that can do that. And if you're following them on sites like LinkedIn, you created a LinkedIn following group of former employees, and your people and culture and hiring team and TA team are following those individuals. They're often the greatest fits for roles as they develop their career, maybe leadership roles, senior developer roles, etc. So what we're encouraging to do is build these communities, get them to follow your page. Now, obviously, when you go to re-engage, there's some key questions you want to ask. And two of them we have suggested here. What have you been doing since you left? What skills have you developed? And you know when they left, where they were. And let's be honest, people in their 20s to 30s, we all mature, we all gain skill sets. This is a great area to focus on for your number two skill sets. Number three, the pandemic expedited the number of workers, especially in IT, marketing, and other areas that went on their own to become 1099s or independent contractors. I know there's many organizations that kind of push away from this area. I understand why, but I'm encouraging you to consider this group because it's a large contingent of workers that are highly skilled that can do great project work for you. So as an organization, you have to have a policy or strategy for W-2 workers, contract or direct, independent contractors, 1099s, or corp to corp. Again, I'm going to reiterate a great way for you to get highly skilled workers for short-term, long-term projects and have fixed costs and not have legacy costs when you no longer need them. Can we bring up the poll here? All right, so we have a poll here. Do these retention drivers resonate with you? Oh, well, I'll talk about them first. So this was an interesting slide. Over the last 20 years, what were the retention drivers? Can we remove that poll so we can see all of them first? Thank you. So 20 years ago, the focus people had was career growth, learning development, challenging work, and meaningful work. Fast forward today, the meaningful purpose-driven work is number one. Number two is flexible work arrangements, and number three is company stability. As I mentioned earlier, compensation is important, but it's assumed nowadays that you're going to be there. So these are the top three things that job seekers are telling us they're looking for. If we can pull that poll back up and have people vote, that'd be excellent. So do you agree with these? Sure. How do these retention drivers resonate with you? Strongly agree, disagree, or strongly disagree? We'll give 10 seconds. All right, let's see the results. All right, so 100% agree to strongly agree with these things. That's a good sign that we're all on the same page. We'll continue on with the presentation. All right, Natalie.
Yeah, so we've shared information today that started with how do you create a skills-based job description, really keeping that candidate in mind, thinking through the compelling reasons to highlight on your job posting that aligns with the skills that individual is going to be using on their job. And to encourage everyone to think through and innovate some creative new ways of reaching the talent. And that could be using social media, TikTok and YouTube as an example, but to really articulate what is the culture and values that you at your company have. And it really is so important to have a quick and clear interview process. And that goal to create a 14-day interview cycle is that challenge, and to go for it and to see how you can see the benefits of both attracting and hiring some top talent. And with that strategy in mind, keep the candidate pools in mind, those strategies for connecting to more diverse talent as well. But then also keep in mind that you have individuals within your own organization, boomerang employees, as well as gig workers that can contribute to the success of your company. And with that too, the final takeaway that we'll share is that ease of the application really is so critical. So how you set up the application, that it's mobile friendly, that you have just the amount of questions that you need and information that you need, that you're not duplicating the entry of information is so important. And, we have a few statistics up here just showing the ease of application and the importance of that experience for the user is so critical because, we have we rely on our technology all the time, and being inclusive to being able to connect with everyone where they're at is so important with making sure that we have mobile friendly and the ease of application. So just really appreciate everyone's time today. We've seen a couple questions that come in as far as the slides. Yes, we'll be able to share them, but would love to take the time now as you all take this information and digest to add in more questions and even thoughts into that area in Zoom portion. Any questions?
I'll just add some commentary as we wait for some questions. So what we shared today was is sometimes aspirational for some clients. Oh, here's a question. This was IT focused. Would you say this is the finance or for other domains? My general answer to that is yes. I think there's some differences when you get into light industrial operations, administrative. Some of the things will change a little bit, but overall, my response would be yes. Natalie, you want to add to that?
100%. And some of I've also experienced and worked with other sectors of taking skills-based approach. And it truly is that clarity that you receive when you know what you're looking for in the job posting, because then your team is aligned. You're doing a lot of pre-work in order to then reduce the time to hire, to improve retention, and to see a lot of benefits that take a little time to see those benefits. So yes, I definitely have seen similar experiences of positive benefits from taking skills-based approach, and that can eccentric focus to the hiring process.
So question 2 from Brian is, how important is education these days? Is work ethic, culture, skills more important? I'm just going to start with here. None of us are saying education is not important. What we're asking you to do is look at the core of the job. Is a bachelor's degrees or master's degrees absolutely required? And I can share in my world, when I joined Procom, like for our sales and recruiters, we had bachelor's degrees as our absolute requirements. And then when we really sat back, it's definitely a highly preferred, but we removed that and we're able to get good candidate flow coming in. To your question, is work ethic, culture, skills important? Yes. I think the debate a lot of us have, and I use the word grit, and this is often generational stuff. The way you go back to, I walked to school uphill in the snow both the ways, those types of stories. But I think it's a change in the way we work. And I go back to, I'm a Gen Xer. When I came into workforce, we were the latchkey kids. We were very independent. We didn't want to collaborate. Obviously, there was a difference in the way we were raised, but we do collaborate, we do adjust. And I think that's what's happening in the marketplace. You have 5 generations in the workforce. We all have our preferred methods of working. The newer generations coming in, the attention to detail is a little bit different. The attention span's different. I find they have good work ethic. You just have to adjust your organization.
Yeah, and what I'll add too is exactly that. Education is absolutely important, and we all have both learned and honed skills in various ways. So that's where, when we're doing that check, is just to make sure, are what we asking for truly needed? When in reality, in America, only 70% of Americans do not have a bachelor's degree. So when we think of that as a sourcing strategy and saying that you need to have, in that example, a bachelor's degree, we're eliminating a lot of talent that may have the skills that we need for a job. So that's where it's really encouraging people of what are those skills. And even a little bit more beyond that is like the thought process behind work ethic, culture, skills is that we just need to get clear of both the occupational and foundational competencies, because we usually hire for those occupational competencies that typically come with education training programs, and then we'll fire for the foundational because we weren't articulating both of them through the hiring process. So we weren't assessing for skills that could be even combined as our concept of work ethic. So it's getting really clear, like, what do you mean by work ethic is even more important as well.
Well, if I could add 2 more comments there. When a degree is required, what I've often found interesting was, like, say a bachelor's degree is required in some IT skill set. A lot of the senior leaders in companies don't have that degree. They have a bachelor's degree in something else and they learn the skill set. The other thing for younger generations that are coming in, where did they get the skills? Is it a bachelor's degree program, or did they just complete a 16-week boot camp? that gave them the relevant skills up to date. So keep that in mind when you look at candidates coming in. Where were the
Both are
skills
great.
learned? Yeah, both are great. Exactly.
Both are
Don't
great.
eliminate one or the other. All right, next
Yeah.
question from Stephanie is, are you seeing difficulties in filling senior roles when there's a requirement to be in the office 2 to 3 days a week? I'm not going to lie and say that's a no. There is some challenges there. What we have discovered, and we filled numerous roles in senior levels, we're talking 6-figure level jobs, is explaining why they need to be in the office, and is it an agreed, is it a Wednesday, Thursday, having a schedule built so people can build their lives around it. When we've overcome that obstacle of these are the days and why, we've had more success. When that can't clearly be defined, it does create a lot of issues. Natalie, anything you want to add there?
No, nothing to add. Thank you.
All right, next one is, how do you handle the longer interview periods when you're a staffing agency, aka the middleman? You're working with the end client who does the client interviews. Many of the client managers take a long time to interview, and then we lose the candidate. Well, this is the world I live. I run a staffing firm, so it's upfront managing the process as much as you can. It's hard, but when especially on the direct hire side, when we get an order, let's say we got one today and Natalie was my client, I would say, Natalie, today is Wednesday the 22nd. 4 or 5 days from now, I need to have your schedule cleared. So Tuesday and Wednesday next week, we don't have to do the entire day, but a 4-hour block I need to clear so that you can interview these candidates. Our expectation is we want to know when the time you want this person to start, and we reverse engineer it. And we're going to try to mandate or dictate as much as we can the process. There are a lot of X factors. There's a lot of people still operating like it's 2003, which we said earlier, which is let's do 6, 7, 8 interviews, and then someone's on vacation, we have a trip to do. They're finding every reason to make it not a priority. So it is a challenge, but that's what my recommendation would be.
Yeah, that's awesome. The next question is, how long do you recommend the section about what the day-to-day of the job is to be, or do you recommend skipping that and just jumping into the skills and competencies needed or utilized in the role? And what I would encourage you, and what I've seen some success with other organizations and companies, is that you use, well, what are those day-to-day expectations? It's like, well, what are the skills that people are using? And use that day-to-day insight to define what that competency is, so that has the lens of the role and how that competency is used. So it's to stay as focused as possible on the job posting, because job seekers are looking at a lot of things. You don't have a lot of time, so stay focused, be articulate of the skills needed, and give the insight of how those skills are used within the role.
Well,
Anything to
I
add,
would,
Chris?
yeah, no, I would just add one thing there. Have other people look at the posting and say, does that interest me? As a passive job seeker, would I be interested in applying for this position? Keep in mind, people don't want to read pages anymore. They want to get more, it's more bullet point to the blunt answers. So a day-to-day is good, but tell me why I should work for your organization. Tell me the career path I'm going to have. Tell me how I have a voice. And then tell me the skill sets I need today and what you'll train me on. And then the Gen Z generations also tell me how you're going to personally develop me, which is something newer to the workforce that wasn't something addressed by employers in the past. All right, last question so far right here is, as we're seeing lots of large tech companies are laying off due to AI technologies, would attracting tech professionals be in high demand or less demand for 2023 and beyond? We're making some assumptions there that they're laying off due to AI technology. I think AI is having a factor. My personal opinion is a lot of these tech companies had high forecasts and maybe overhired, and now they're right sizing. I don't see a demand for tech workers shrinking. Natalie, I know in the state of Indiana, you have a drive to hire, I think it's 41,000 workers in the next 5 years. Tech workers are in high demand. The pandemic, in my opinion, exposed a lot of companies for having weaker infrastructure. The way we buy is we need to have great user interfaces. So software developers, e-commerce, data security, all those are high priority jobs I don't see going away in any format. But then if you asked me 15 years ago what an Uber driver was, I couldn't tell you what that was either. So new jobs are being created. I don't think it's going to be less demand. I do think that tech workers are, one of the big changes in tech workers is they're becoming more business oriented, meaning they're just not about the tech, they're about how it impacts the business and the community. So you're seeing a little bit more well-rounded individuals. Natalie, anything to add?
Yeah, I'll just speak to the larger tech workforce demand that we're seeing as well. So not any particular factor that is contributing or not, but we definitely still see the demand. And there are statistics that show for every one job posting, there's 11 like 11 openings for. So like for every person, there's 11 openings in tech. Let me correct that. And so, like you said, like we know in order for Indiana to continue to be competitive within the technology market, we have to grow our workforce, and we want to double the growth rate, which means adding. So it's meeting the current need and adding that 41,000 individuals, which also it's going to be a little bit more because of the churn of the market and workforce anyway. So the demand is there for sure.
Next
I do see
question.
one final one. Yeah.
There's actually two here. So we'll do, are you
Great.
finding it easier to hire talent from Canada to fill US roles? It is an option. The TN visa is one that is an easier visa to get across the border. What I'll say here is a lot of companies are taking a North American and, this might be a surprise, South American approach to hire talent. So South America has been emerging as one, and it makes a lot of sense. They're in the similar time zones as the US. You don't have the 10 to 12 hour difference of those in the in Asia time zones. And they often speak English, and from a travel point of view, you get there in 4 to 6 hours. So we are seeing more availability there. The biggest change in the Canada pool and the employment market in the last 3 years is formerly you only looked in the geography of the region you lived in for talent, and now with the remote workforce, you're looking across the world. So Canada is a good option, in particular to Toronto. The big metro areas of Toronto, Vancouver are excellent sources of talent. In fact, I think Toronto has maybe a little bit more supply than demand due to some immigration policies they have. So I would definitely encourage people to look there. And then the last question, we are finding out that more experienced IT tech folks are interested in contractor opportunities than FTE. Agreed. And what the pandemic showed, especially experienced folks, is they have a skill that's in demand, and they don't want to be at the mercy of employers telling them how to work and when to work anymore. So they have chosen to go into the business for themselves. It gives them a lot of flexibility on how they want to work and where they want to work. And the reality of what I say to most is we're all contractors. Not many people are staying at companies for 10, 20, 30 years anymore. So if you change your perception of what the average length of duration of employment is 2 to 3 years now. So we're all contractors in some forms, but we are definitely seeing that from IT tech, also in marketing. We're seeing that the graphic design world, the high-end marketing professionals are doing that also.
Yeah, that's great. And as I'm just thinking of all of our conversation and the questions, thank you so much for all those questions. So super engaging and to hear your insights from the information shared, and just thinking through the positive impacts to taking these steps into action. Is I actually know of a company that had used skills-based practices in their talent management, and they were able to reduce their vacancy rate that was for this call center environment. Used to be like 35%, and reduced it to 10%. But even more so when they used a skills-based approach to their hiring, to their interviewing, onboarding, they reduced that onboarding time that would usually take someone 5 to 6 months to get up to speed. They reduced it to within weeks. So when we're thinking of that power of expediting and being more efficient in the interview cycle, and more efficiency within the onboarding, being intentional with the 30, 60, 90 still, but that you're able to get that person up to full speed, the return on investment and the alignment is huge. So the opportunity is definitely there.
Well, we would like to close out and say thank you for attending our webinar today and for the great questions. There will be the PowerPoint sent out, and the video will be available. And Natalie and I's contact information is on the screen should you want to reach out and directly speak to either of us. But with that said, I'll say thank you. And Natalie, do you want to close out?
Yeah, again, just really appreciate everyone's engagement and thoughtfulness, and hope if we can be of any support that you reach out.